So I'm sure you all have been waiting for this. This is my reactionary review of Batman vs. Superman. Now, I'm man enough to admit I was wrong. When I first heard about this movie, I got really pissed off. I'm like, I really loved Man of Steel, if you've seen my review of that. I loved that movie. I loved all the Nolan Batman films, and I'm like, why are they putting these two things together? Why can't we just have just a normal sequel? Why do we have to bring Batman into it? Why does it have to be Ben Affleck? Why do we need another Batman reboot? And I thought that this was a contrived and shitty idea. That I heard Wonder Woman was going to be in it. I'm like, this is the fucking worst idea I've ever heard. But I just saw the movie yesterday, and I have to say I loved the movie. I thought it was a great movie. It was a movie that had flaws, and if you're kind of a guy who likes to pick films apart, etc., then you probably wouldn't like it that much. I gave it a 9 out of 10. I had a lot of fun. It was very intense. I really enjoyed the movie. You can really see Nolan's mark on it. Now, Nolan didn't direct this. He produced it. Zack Snyder, I guess, kind of being his protege. But he really kind of brings Schneider's good elements into focus and kind of restrains his bad elements. And we have Hans Zimmer back, as always when Nolan's involved. So Zack Snyder, I think, is best described as a guy who's very good at doing music video type things. He's really good with action scenes. He's really good with like highly stylized stuff, particularly kind of stylizing stuff to music. And Hans Zimmer is an absolute genius when it comes to music. So it's kind of like peanut butter and jelly, and I guess Nolan would be like the butter on the sandwich. So because you have a guy who's really good at taking music and making like just very kind of intense, stylized scenes based around it. And you combine them with one of the greatest modern musical composers. And then you add in Nolan, who's one of the greatest kind of writers slash plot guys, and you have a good combination. Now, there are a lot of flaws in this movie, but I liked it, and we'll get into this as we go through. This may be a bit long because I have a lot to say about this movie, and this movie is 2.5 hours long. So this will probably be about half an hour. So, not Superman Returns. Fuck, this isn't Superman Returns. I also like to say this is just about the critics. The critics gave this movie like 30% on Rotten Tomatoes. They said it was a piece of shit. I think they just hate Nolan because Nolan's too right-wing, and this movie was pretty damn right-wing. Also, the critics tend to hate serious action movies. They like kind of campy, quirky, bizarre things like the Avengers. They didn't like Man of Steel, and they didn't like Dark Knight Rises because those movies were too serious and tried too hard. They don't like that. They just like dumb shit. So Man of Steel takes place 18 months after the events of Superman 1. Much of Metropolis was destroyed by the World Engine. The movie opens with a flashback to Batman's childhood, his parents getting killed, etc. And that, I kind of sighed. I'm like, oh fuck, are they going to go through all Batman's backstory? But it only takes about 5 minutes. It's a pretty cool scene, actually. He falls down the hole, his parents get killed, etc. And kind of, it's kind of a bit of foreshadowing, kind of a Chekhov's gun that he couldn't save his mother. And we'll see this kind of being repeated later on. So my point is, with regards to Batman, they show a little bit of his background, but not too much, just enough to kind of give you a bit of an idea, refresh your memory as to who Batman is, where he comes from. You don't really need too much. I think we're all pretty familiar with the story of Batman. So that happens, and there's a scene of Bruce Wayne arriving in Metropolis and seeing one of his best friends get destroyed as one of his buildings is taken down by Zod's laser machine. Now, what's interesting is we see the first of many religious symbolism in this movie, as the guy who, Bruce Wayne's friend who's about to die, does actually like pray and give himself last rites before he dies, which is something you never see in movies. Because realistically, if I had like 30 seconds left, I would try to make my peace with God too. So I like that. So meanwhile, Superman has become a very controversial figure, and I think this is one of the film's strong points. This is probably why critics disliked it, but they really try to realistically look at what would happen if Superman came to Earth. We have kind of the first public superhero. We have a man who can basically move instantly throughout the world, who can hear just about anything, who is completely indestructible, who no one can stand against. So people naturally start to almost develop a cult around him. They view him as God. They view him as a messianic figure. And a lot of this movie is kind of around how do we deal with Superman? How do we deal with kind of this transcendent figure? And how does Superman deal with being a god? Because it's not easy to being a god. A lot of people have wished for it, but only a crazy man would really wish for it. I mean, if I suppose people would wish for it so that they could do good, but at the same time, there's a lot of hard decisions you have to make. And the film kind of opens with one of those. Lois Lane is interviewing some members of Boko Haram. I know they're probably not Boko Haram, but I'm going to call them Boko Haram in West Africa. And it turns out the guy who's with her is actually a member of the CIA. So because of that, the Boko Haram general is going to rape her and kill her, but Superman shows up and saves her. Meanwhile, though, a group of mercenaries shoot the rest of the members of Boko Haram and run away. So, because of that, we are introduced to... I'm sorry, the beginning of this film is kind of hard to get through. Just there's a lot of stuff that happens to set up. I'm probably not doing it justice. Let's see here. So all that stuff happens, and then we are taken to one of the antagonists of this film, Senator June Finch, or as I like to call her, the Harpy Bitch. She is a Jew from Kentucky who hates Superman because he's not controlled by the people. He's not controlled by the people. He's not a democratic figure. He makes decisions based on his own morality, and that's bad. Because this is democracy, it's muff freedom. It's not even muff freedom because she's a Democrat. It's just the will of the people, and Superman has to do that. So there's widespread criticism that Superman killed the members of Boko Haram. He also stopped North Korea from nuking someone, and he saved a bunch of people who were going to die in a flood. And because of that, they're like she decides that he's a menace because he's unilaterally intervening in foreign countries. And he killed innocent people, and there's some like African woman, does not answer to anyone. He does not even answer to God. And I'm like, well, why are you complaining? He killed like the Boko Haram ISIS guys. I wish he would go and kill the rest of them. But apparently that's a bad thing because she's a fucking dildo. So she begins kind of this campaign to politically isolate Superman. Meanwhile, Batman has begun to become increasingly frustrated. Ben Affleck is too old to play Batman, and this is actually kind of used to the film's advantage. He's kind of started to lose his patience as he realizes his war against crime is going nowhere, and they find that he started torturing and branding criminals. Now, the irony of this is Superman gets really pissed off about this. Like, you can't do that, Batman. You're taking the law into your own hands, which is exactly what Superman does. And there's widespread public condemnation against the actions of Batman because the people he brands tend to get killed in jail. So what sort of people does Batman torture and then brand? Well, one of them, which they show on screen, is a human trafficker who has dozens of women locked in cages in his basement. And the other guy was a child molester who raped dozens of children. And Batman marked them and they got killed in jail. Oh no! How could Batman do that? They didn't have their day in court. So I guess we're supposed to be sad that Batman is getting pissed off at the scum of the earth and justly basically signing their death warrant. But anyways, so Clark Kent gets really mad about that, and he kind of starts a campaign through the Daily Planet and as Superman to shut Batman down. Meanwhile, we have Lex Luthor, played by Jesse Eisenberg, who is a strange choice. As my friend Abstract put it, Eisenberg versus Heisenberg, because sometimes one letter can make a big difference. Why they didn't get Bryan Cranston to play Lex Luthor when he was pretty much the most obvious choice ever, I don't know. Jesse Eisenberg doesn't really do a bad job. It's just kind of weird. He's not a bad villain. He's just not really what I think of when I think of Lex Luthor. When I think of Lex Luthor, I think of some really kind of cold sociopathic schemer. And Jesse Eisenberg is a sociopathic schemer, but he's very eccentric. He's very crazy. And I guess his backstory is he's East German. And his father grew up under communism. And he kind of justifies his whole thing as he views Superman as being a false god. Is in a way that communism was a false god over his father, and that we've just traded the men in red for the man in blue. Overall, I'm not exactly sure what Lex Luthor's motivation is. I'm not sure if he just wants to see the world burn. I'm not really sure. It's kind of interesting. But Lex Luthor discovers kryptonite from the failed leftover from some of the World Engine and from the other Kryptonian ships. So he approaches the U.S. Senator who's anti-Superman with the idea of making anti-Kryptonian weapons using the kryptonite he found. Now, the sensible person might go, basically Lex Luthor's like, okay, so we have this guy who's unkillable. We don't have to use the weapon. We should just have a weapon in reserve in case Superman goes fucking crazy and tries to blow the world up. And she's like, no, because that's violence, and violence doesn't solve anything. And I'm like, well, but Superman can just blow the world up. Like, you don't even have to use it. You just keep it under lock and key. If he doesn't go crazy, you don't use it. I mean, there's other Kryptonians out there. How do you know there's not some other guy like General Zod who's just flying around the universe blowing shit up, going crazy? I don't know. Also, the public blames Superman for what happened at with General Zod and the machine destroying half of Metropolis. There's one guy whose legs got blown off and whose family died, who's become kind of this crazed guy driven by grief. And Lex Luthor recruits him and gets him cleaned up and gets him to take part in a Senate hearing looking at kind of the crimes of Superman. So him and the dildo Democrat and everybody else who hates Superman are going to have a big hearing where they're going to yell at him for not being democratic. And she's like, politics is not solved by violence or force. It's a conversation. I'm just like, oh, you fucking dildo. So that happened. Meanwhile, Batman is increasingly becoming worried about Superman. He kind of falls for Lex. By the way, Lex in the meantime keeps stirring up public resentment against Superman. Keeps trying to, in particular, reach out to Batman, get him to be afraid of Superman. He keeps framing Superman for doing stuff around the world. And Batman has kind of eventually come to the conclusion that Superman has to be taken down because Superman's a fundamental threat to humanity. And Batman's basically like, at the end of the day, I'm a human. And even more so than kind of my in-group loyalty is to humanity. It's even if my main enemy are criminals, they're still humans. Their crimes are petty. Their crimes do not threaten the world. I mean, they threaten society indirectly, but it's not like Superman who can blow the world in two with his laser vision if he really wants to. So Batman increasingly becomes paranoid about that, and he has this kind of really trippy dream where he sees a future where Superman has basically taken control of most of the world, and it's kind of in a desert to imply nuclear weapons were used. And it's like this totalitarian nightmare where Batman's still one of the last people fighting, and who is desperately trying to get some kryptonite to kill Superman. And there's like these like fascist goons who are like wearing Superman like the S symbols on their jackets and stuff. So implying that there's some kind of like New World Order caused by a rogue Superman. And this dream to Batman kind of drives him to decide that Superman has to go down. As he also says to Alfred that he's getting old and he won't be able to do this much longer. This is kind of a reoccurring theme in the movie, that Batman doesn't think believes that he's going to die pretty soon, as he keeps getting into extremely dangerous situations and he's not as fast as he used to be. There's also the issue that his dynasty, the Wayne family, is soon going to come to an end. And there's a scene where he looks down at his family crest and he says, "Do you know where my family came from, Alfred? They started off as fur traders, trading pelts to the French. They started off as hunters, and I will be a hunter once more." So he goes to steal the shipment of kryptonite that Lex is smuggling in. Lex went above the senator's head to the Department of Defense and made a deal with them that if they gave him General Zod's body and access to the Kryptonian ships, he would build them a kryptonite weapon to use against Superman. So that happens. So Batman intercepts tries to steal it, but Superman intervenes. And he basically tells Batman, the next time the signal's in the sky, don't go. Your career's over. Batman is dead. Go back to whatever your normal life was. And Batman, this is the final straw. He's decided he's going to kill Superman because Superman is stopping him from fulfilling his destiny of fighting crime. Superman's basically taken away his life work. So Superman, after this, goes to the Senate hearing, and it turns out once he gets there, and it's a great scene, by the way, just because Superman just kind of shows up and then walks up the stairs, and there's a bunch of anti-alien protesters, which is kind of neat. So in the Senate chamber room, it turns out Lex Luthor has vanished, and then the obvious kind of comes about, and Superman can't react fast enough. But the guy whose legs had gotten blown off has a huge bomb in his wheelchair, and it goes off, killing everybody in the room but Superman. A grief-stricken Superman flies away in despair. It's eventually figured out that it was not Superman who carried out the attack, but the guy in the wheelchair with a bomb in it. There's a lot of questions, particularly since Superman has a kind of a breakdown and a crisis of conscience, and is very. So for Batman, this is the final strum Superman for the attack, and he decides that he's going to have one final battle. So we get like a training montage, and Batman manages to break in and steal the kryptonite from LexCorp. So he makes kryptonite gas grenades and a kryptonite lance that will be powerful enough to kill Superman. He also builds a bat exoskeleton, which you can see in this picture, which I actually think looks pretty cool. It's kind of bulky, but it looks kind of realistic for what an exoskeleton would be. Now, even with that, he obviously stands no chance against Superman, but he'll even the odds a bit. He can take some punches from Superman and not immediately die while wearing the exoskeleton. Plus, it's part of a larger plan. So, Batman is determined to make his final stand, and he turns on the bat signal and has all his traps set up and waits for Superman to come. Superman, though, has to go and face Lex Luthor, who has kidnapped Lois Lane. He succeeds in saving Lois Lane from falling and sets her back on the ground. But as he's about to take Lex Luthor in, Lex points out that he has kidnapped Superman's mother, Martha, and is holding her at an undisclosed location. And if Superman does not kill Batman within the next hour and bring back the Bat's head, then Superman Mother will be burnt alive, because Superman is a demon and you burn witches because witches give birth to demons. So his plan is either Superman will get killed by Batman, or he'll kill Batman and prove to the world basically what a monster he is by killing the humanity's greatest hero. So it's kind of this interesting moral quandary, and Superman can't really square the circle. So he decides to go and fight Batman maybe try to convince him to help him. He's not really sure what to do though, because he'd pick his mother's life over Batman's, but at the same time he kind of realizes the two of them are being played off against each other. So Superman shows up and Batman starts to activate a series of traps. Batman gives a speech about how Superman is a coward because he's invincible and only a man can show courage. And we kind of get like some cool statements like it takes a man to kill a monster, etc. And we get this kind of really neat theme of kind of Batman representing the human spirit. Batman kind of representing everything that's dirty and gritty, yet hopeful and strong in the human spirit. Whereas Superman kind of represents everything noble and pure, but also overly idealistic and detached from reality. So we kind of have this fundamental dichotomy between the two, which is really neat. Now the fight itself I thought was really cool. Zack Snyder can really do action scenes. The music in this movie was phenomenal. Now I saw this in IMAX, and if you can see this movie in IMAX, I think it would make the movie a lot better. The much bigger sound really just helps with the Hans Zimmer music. And it just really makes this movie the music. Just every punch is like choreographed to the music. It's just absolutely amazing. Batman has some traps, like he has an ultrasonic thing, he has chain guns and stuff, and of course none of those work against Superman. But that's just to lure him into a trap. So the two of them just start fighting. Batman winds up doing absolutely nothing to Superman, even with his exoskeleton. It does give him, make him like able to take some hits though, as it has like shock absorbers in it, so he can survive some of Superman's attacks. So finally he uses his gas gun to fire a grenade at Superman. The kryptonite initially makes Superman completely helpless, but he rapidly regains his strength to be at least stronger than a normal human. However, Batman has his exoskeleton, so Batman proceeds to basically beat the living crap out of Superman. It's a really good fight scene. They're fairly balanced. Batman's obviously a better fighter. Superman doesn't really know how to fight. He's just so strong, he can just kind of beat people up with one blow. So Batman wipes the floor with him. Superman gets his strength back, but Batman shoots him with another gas grenade. We get a really cool dramatic scene where Batman like picks up Superman and then throws him down like a stairwell. I actually thought when he picked him up that he was going to break his back like Bane did to him in The Dark Knight. But he doesn't do that. Instead, he just throws him down the stairwell, and then he jumps down with his grapple gun and he picks up the spear. And he's about to kill Superman when Superman says, "Please, if you kill me, you'll kill Martha." And it turns out that Batman's mother is also named Martha. Go figure. And so Batman gets just drops the spear, and Lois Lane and Superman explain how they've all been played and how Lex was behind everything. So Batman gets really angry, and Batman goes, "I'll go save your mother. You go take Lex down. I'm a detective. I know how to find these people." And it turns out Alfred had been monitoring the conversation and figured out where Martha was. So Batman goes. Now, this Batman's very different from the Nolan Batman. He's much more cynical. He's much darker. He's much less idealistic. He kills people and he uses guns a lot. So, like, all of his Batmobile and shit have, like, chain guns on them, and he doesn't mind shooting people. So we have another awesome action scene where Batman takes down, like, 30 guys. We can see that he's getting old, though, as he gets, like, shot and stabbed a couple times. His bat armor, he's not wearing his exoskeleton anymore, but his normal armor is pretty resistant to bullets. But still, it's a good action scene. But you can see he's getting old and slower than he used to be. He succeeds in saving Superman's mother, and we get a funny scene where he's like, "I'm a friend of your son's," and she's like, "I figured." Just because, like, who else would he be? So Lois Lane stupidly throws the spear down a hole full of water, so it can't be used against her love again. While that's happening, though, Superman confronts Lex Luthor, who's inside of the Kryptonian ship. It turns out that Lex had come to the conclusion that that Superman might well win, and he had rigged the deck in his favor. So what he had done is, using Zod's body and some of his own DNA, he had created an abomination, an ancient Kryptonian monster, Doomsday. Doomsday looks kind of like the Hulk. The Hulk meets H.P. Lovecraft. He's this giant, writhing mass of muscle, bone, and like claws. When he comes out, he's initially pretty weak, and Superman just beats the ever-living crap out of him. As Superman beats the crap out of him, though, it becomes readily apparent that the more damage he takes, the stronger he gets. Every time he's taken enough damage, he grows bigger, and he unleashes a massive shockwave which destroys large portions of the city. Superman eventually kind of figures out that he can't win, so he flies up into the atmosphere with Doomsday, and the U.S. Army fires a nuke at them. The nuke basically kills Superman, but Doomsday merely absorbs it and falls back to Earth stronger than ever. However, because they're in space, the sun's a lot brighter, and it brings Superman back to life much stronger than before. Batman is desperately trying to find the spear, but he gets sidetracked because with Superman gone, he's the only person left who can stand a chance against Doomsday, who he proceeds to riddle with bullets from the chain guns on the Batwing. Just as he's about to die, though, Wonder Woman shows up. Now, Wonder Woman had kind of been throughout the movie. She wasn't a major character. She was an antiquities dealer who kept kind of flirting with Batman, and who Batman was pretty sure was involved with some stuff. But she shows up in full battle armor and proceeds to start fighting Doomsday. We then get the best scene in the movie where Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman all have a futile battle against Doomsday. Wonder Woman uses her sword, Superman punches him, Batman uses cannons and stuff, and they just lay waste to each other. Obviously, our heroes are getting their asses kicked because Doomsday just absorbs everything. Wonder Woman succeeds in cutting off his body parts, but he just regrows them. While they're doing this, Lois goes to try and find the spear, but unfortunately, something falls on her and she gets trapped in the water. So Superman breaks off the battle and goes and saves her. She's weakened, though, so he has to dive down the well and take the spear out himself. Meanwhile, Batman is having to... Wonder Woman got knocked out, so Batman's having to face Doomsday alone. With no superpowers, he's basically just jumping around with his grappling gun, desperately trying to avoid the monster. So what happens is... So Batman and Wonder Woman launch a final desperate attack on Doomsday. Superman picks up the spear and, managing to fight through the pain of being so close to the kryptonite, flies towards Doomsday. Batman has one gas canister left, which he fires at Doomsday, briefly incapacitating him. Superman uses this opportunity with all his remaining strength to fly at Doomsday and shove the Krypton lance into him. He's also weakened, though, and Doomsday takes this opportunity to stab him through the chest. The two are briefly locked in a mortal struggle. Superman winds up pulling the claw through him, though, so he can get better vantage and push the spear all the way through Doomsday, finally destroying him but dying in the process. The film concludes with Batman and Wonder Woman at Superman's funeral out in Kansas. It's revealed that Superman had sent a ring ahead and that he was planning to propose to the love of his life, Lois Lane. Meanwhile, in Washington, D.C., a full military funeral is given to the empty casket of Superman as his real body is buried back with his family in Kansas. Lois Lane, in a tearful scene, throws some dirt on the grave. Ben Affleck as Batman is standing there unknowing of how to deal with loss of someone close to him. Wonder Woman essentially states that Batman can only honor him as a soldier. Batman tells her that they need to find the other metahumans because he believes that something is coming. The film ends with Lex Luthor being taken into jail, shaved, and giving a megalomaniacal rant about how He has, in resurrecting Doomsday and killing Superman, he's sent out a beacon to the rest of the universe that will draw in primordial evils from the stars, which I'm assuming refers to Darkseid. Now, I'm not super knowledgeable about comics, but I know Darkseid is kind of the main villain in the in the DC universe, kind of like how Apocalypse is the main villain, kind of in the X-Men universe. And there's the Omega sign a couple times in the movie. Towards the end of the film, though, we can hear a faint heartbeat in Superman's grave, and the dirt around him begins to levitate. So, what can be said about Batman versus Superman? I think the movie is a very interesting kind of morality tale. How does mankind deal with having a real... I'm not saying that God isn't real, but like an actively intervening God. How does God deal with being God? Where does he draw the line? How much does he intervene? Does he control humanity directly? Does he control it a little less? How does he face the decisions? This is also contrasted with the fact that Clark Kent had a very kind of moral, Christian, red state upbringing, and he's basically kind of a Boy Scout who's very humble. He doesn't really want to be a God figure, but at the same time, millions of people believe in him, and he saves thousands of people. He's improved the lives of the entire planet, and he's given them something to kind of, I guess, believe in a time of uncertainty and fear. At the same time, he is a false god. He's just a man from another planet with a humble upbringing. It's kind of implied, at least in the first movie, and to a certain extent in this movie, that Superman is, at least to some extent, religious. He does believe in a higher power, and he feels that he's taking that higher power's place. My understanding of the Kryptonian religion is it's kind of a monotheistic faith. So Christianity would probably be somewhat... like, obviously they wouldn't have Christ, but it's not, like, that different. It's a bit like how, like, Islam is not that different. In terms of kind of the basic, like, if you just explain the basic tenets, it would be immediately recognizable to a Jew or Christian as being another kind of monotheistic religion. So that's kind of a theme throughout it. Another theme throughout it is Lex Luthor believes that demons come from heaven and angels come from hell. That Superman is a false god, a false messiah, and he sees in him the kind of thing that dominated, I guess, kind of communism in the Eastern Bloc. This idea that the worst things come from the best intentions, and that the best things come from the worst intentions. His exact motivation is somewhat unclear, and I'd like to read maybe a deeper kind of analysis, because he has like a lot of kind of philosophical lines he kind of says. Batman, I think, is the most sympathetic character in this movie, as he really just kind of stands for order, for humanity, for kind of the human spirit, whereas the Superman kind of stands for more the divine. Kind of that heaven and earth thing that's a very prevalent theme. I didn't think the conflict between them was at all contrived. Obviously, there's some problems in this movie, mainly with regards to Lex Luthor. And his character kind of is the weakest part of the film. Still, it's not that bad. While there's plenty of things to criticize about the movie, I think to a certain extent, what do you expect? It's a comic book movie. For what it is, it has good characters, good writing, excellent music, excellent fight scenes, and has plenty of themes that you can analyze and discuss. I think we can say the true villain of the movie was actually the Democratic senator, and no one really gave two shits when she died because she was a harpy bitch, and also a liberal. So I hope you enjoyed this reactionary review. Maybe I'll do like some character profiles. I'm sorry this is so long, but this was a long movie and I had a lot to say about it. I definitely recommend going to see the movie. 9 out of 10. This is Argent. I'll talk to you later.